It's Chris, Liege Games. So, you've bought the latest game. You've bought the latest collection of games. You have backed the latest Kickstarter, GameFound, Indiegogo, etc. You have pledged. So, where do you draw the line? How many expansions do you need? How many expansions are too many? Is the all-in worth it? Where is the line between add-ons as a good thing, add-ons as a deluxe, superfluous thing? How much is too much when it comes to something beyond the core of a game? And is it worthwhile? Let's take a look at a few examples, pros, cons, my thoughts, and a little bit of everything else. Let's do this. Now, we don't have to go very far to have an illustration of this concept. In case you can't see behind me, I have several things that demonstrate the lack of restraint sometimes when it comes to this hobby. And therein lies the problem. Therein lies the issue. Collection, playing, collector, player. I don't think any of us has to go very far. I don't think I am the exception in that sense. You can see behind me, if you can't, Millennium Blades, big expansion, Marvel United, several expansions, and even the game Destinies. All of these iterations of the same concept from different companies, different spectrums of size of companies, but the nuance, the theme remains the same across the spectrum, right? Multiple expansions, multiple campaigns, multiple products even offered during the same campaign. And the question is, how much of that stuff do you actually... Now again, this is a topic from a luxury hobby, so I'm not going to make any bones about that. But let's stay within the hobby and take a look for a second. Oftentimes, and this is true in the Kickstarter campaign, the crowdfunding campaign, even a little bit on the retail side of things occasionally, lesser, but still there occasionally, in a different way, is the perceived value. And you can define value however you choose to define it. And that is, in essence, what some of this is. Value is often defined in different ways on these crowdfunding campaigns. Sometimes it is in the form of free stretch goals. Sometimes it is in the form of free expansion. Sometimes it is just in the form of extras, just in terms of whatever you're getting stretch goal wise. Nowadays, it's even evolved to include plastic, extra free plastic. I don't know why I did plastic in quotes. It's the free that's in the quotes. The plastic's really plastic. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. Taking several examples, again, straight from my collection. Look at leader games with Root. With the first Kickstarter campaign, the Riverfolk expansion was included at an overall lower cost. Now again, how do you define that? Because ultimately the cost of just the base in those types of situations will be less. But because we are getting a value, a savings, it is triggering that dopamine rush in our brains. Similarly, one of my favorite pre-order websites, Card House, offers a 5% discount for pre-orders. I better get it now while it's on pre-order so I get the better value. Even my most recent video talking about concepts like this, the Terraforming Mars Ares expedition, the value of those 17 extra promos and the slightly upgraded stock and components compared to the retail version of things. For a value, was it a good value in the US, overseas? And that sometimes can be the biggest difference. US and overseas nowadays. Especially with VAT and now with the whole shipping fiasco. It's going to be very interesting. But then let's take a couple of these others. The CMON example. The Awaken Realms example, where stuff is not showing up widely available at retail, where that is a very true concern, whether it's marked Kickstarter exclusive or not. I mean, the others, so much Kickstarter exclusive. Rise of Moloch, not marked Kickstarter exclusive, but not really produced at retail. Not really widely available, period. Several of the Arcadia Quest expansions, like Pets, just has not been available widely, period. And that drives people, before they even have a product, to have it in their back pocket. Or, more succinctly, and a better way of putting it, to take something out of your back pocket before it's in your actual collection. Because I look at those Marvel United expansions that are sitting behind me and I go, I'm not really a biggest fan of some of those expansions. But the fear of missing out on the fact that they may have been good, they may have added the additional stuff, they may have taken the game over the top, drove the all-in. And the perceived value of that original all-in pledge was there. Similarly, but in a different way, to the Leader Games example that I used as well. The last example, and I'm not sure Destiny's is the best fit, but we'll use it. But there have been several other games that have done this along those lines, where you have a game that is launched with several expansions. And the expansions will not be available for some time at retail. Often many, many months or longer. But they will do a short, limited production run at the beginning. I think something like Monolith's Conan did that a little bit in that sense. Where if you didn't get some of those soon, they were in the future. And again, it's not that they're not available, but it's the I get mine first element of things. And are you willing to pay potentially extra nowadays for exclusivity in that way? And some people are, and some people aren't. Companies, publishers are pushing those limits, testing those limits, and people are voting with their wallets. And that is where the truest expression is going to show. And that is the bottom line. As the old saying goes, 1 is too much, but 1,000 is never enough. That is sort of the expansion philosophy. And that is where we see things heading, and you see the price points getting jacked up and jacked up and jacked up. The all-ins going up from 150 to 200 to 300 to 300 to 400 for some of these plastic-laden, crowd-funded, driven, plus or minus IP on top products. And yes, some of that is inflation. Some of that is increasing costs of production. But some of it is just this too. Because the other thing that is well known is that the expansions are where the profit margin is higher. And so from a business standpoint, I don't fault it. But now the marketing side of things is where there can be some preying on fears. And so as a consumer, it's about trying to balance the two of those. Will my game be complete if I don't have that? Because that has also been a true fear with games that we have seen come out, because you have seen games that sort of feel half completed, like the expansion should have been included in the base game in the first place to really flesh out the full experience. Or it's an expansion that you go, I am never going to play this base game without the expansion. And then it makes you wonder, was it done that way on purpose? Or did it just happen to be that this expansion was just designed in a way that was just that much better? Which happens. But those are the thoughts. Those are the concerns. Because with all of the stuff coming out nowadays, expansions are all the rage before the base game hits the shelves. And how much of that can our industry, how much of our hobby can be sustained in that manner? Last point here. How many expansions can a retail game even support? How many expansions do you need to feel like you have the collector's edition? How many iterations of it can be there. Look at Terraforming Mars. Look at Everdell. The number of expansions is starting to, fill up one whole hand. And all of those are adding something different, better, complete. Are you missing out on part of the game if you don't have them? Are you looking over your shoulder, wondering if the grass is greener because someone else has one that you don't? How are you going to know unless you try it out yourself? How are you going to compare to your neighbor who has it and you don't? Is their experience better than yours? The green-eyed monster is not just in my kids' storybooks. It's here in the hobby too. And we need to be careful of that. Because otherwise, it'll go after us too. Now, let me wrap up and close this by saying, I'm not against expansions. I like expansions. Expansions add a lot and give games otherwise maybe not as strong on two legs, or revitalize a game that otherwise might hit the trade or sale pile. But I am definitely of the opinion that every game does not need an expansion. Every game cannot afford to have an expansion. And the plethora of expansions that are coming from a crowdfunding standpoint is going to be harder and harder to keep up with. And eventually, it's going to feel like it's just being overwhelming. And so we also need to be cautious that way as well. And like I've said previously, if you feel the same way or you feel that way as well, it's okay to vote with your wallet. Because that is the loudest way you can vote in this hobby. What do you think? How expansion friendly should we be? How pro expansion or con expansion are you? If you've made it this far and you like what you see, let me know what you think. Subscribe. Thanks for clicking. Thanks for watching. Either way, I appreciate it. See you around. Stay classy.